Welcome everybody to another Voice of Nick show. We are, I wouldn't say starting, but this is the first time on a stream that I'm showing the newest audiobook project that I'm working on and a Kindle book project that I'm working on. This is a book called A Japanese Boy, and this is a really cool piece that I had never heard about. It's not really, it's kind of out of print in the US, and that's my cue to make one of these projects that I do. So I'm going to be putting this out in at least an American edition. I don't know about the rights to other countries yet, but this will be on Kindle and also on Audible in audiobook form. And it will include illustrations, which we've worked on a little bit. The illustrations are not the same as the ones I did for Anyara, the previous project, and Post Homerica, the Greek mythology project we did before that. Because these ones I'm more like an art director on, as you've seen if you've seen the other videos. I'm not like doing them from scratch. But so the project, this is a short little book called A Japanese Boy, which it was published in 1890 by a guy who moved from Japan to the US and wrote about his experiences in Japan and what Japan was like as a first-hand authentic account from a real Japanese person, which, at that time, not a lot of people knew a lot about Japan in the US. So it's a very unique look into, Japanese Meiji era history and the customs of this particular like small little fishing village he lived in, which are a lot of them are just unique to this village. They're not even like general Japanese things. So like uh, I found it extremely fascinating when I read it, and being particularly equipped in the way that I am to you know pronounce all the things in the book and read Japanese and also be an audiobook narrator and a publisher of out of print editions, I thought this was a perfect project to work on. So I already recorded actually the entire book in for the audiobook. I've recorded it and working through the narration editing. It's a pretty short book in the scheme of things. It's probably about as long as Anyara, maybe a little bit shorter. And we're just going to go through it. So the general idea, as with all of these streams, these have been recorded live. So, this is a real-time look into the process of making the audiobook. If you're watching this having read the audiobook or read the text-based version of the book, I hope you enjoy seeing this kind of behind-the-scenes look. And, I'm just kind of going to do this process here. I'm not necessarily like teaching a class on how to make books or whatever. It's just kind of a look behind the scenes. So let's do it. Let's do it.
In the most rapid manner possible, yearning eagerly for dinner. The towel is a piece of cotton, dyed blue, with designs left undyed or dyed black. I grumbled, I confess, when my mother sent me back for a more thorough washing, but with the utmost alacrity, I always saluted the very sight of...
Let me open my thing here too with, where did I actually write this? I have a little document that shows, oh, here we go.
I always saluted the very sight of viands. I always saluted the very always saluted the very sight of viands. Dinner.
The book is written with a kind of like 19th century peculiarity to it because it was written in the actual 19th century. So I gave him a little bit more of like a voice that I thought reflected that. Okay, so time between section, heading, and text.
Always saluted the very sight of viands.
And the concept of the book is that he's basically sharing like small little vignettes from his life, and they're all kind of somewhat connected, but it's not like a plot. It's just a series of little episodes. So they'll have like little subtitles where this one is dinner and one is food and one is, whatever, going to the play, and one is sumo wrestling and stuff like that.
But with the utmost alacrity, I always saluted the very sight of viands. Dinner. Oftentimes I was late and was obliged to eat a late dinner alone. But when all of our family sat down together, enough of life was manifested. All of our family sat down together, but when all of our family...
It's unfortunate that I'm sure anybody who's an audio engineer or who's worked with audio, like me, probably is cringing at looking at some of the waveforms here, but unfortunately this is kind of what you have to do to publish a book on Audible, because they sort of force you to to put your stuff at a very normalized high level. So it's not peaking necessarily, it's not peaking because it's not hitting the top, but it is distorted to an extent. But it plays well on mobile and on headphones and stuff, so I don't, as long as Audible lets me put it out.
Oftentimes
because if you mix it what I would consider properly, Audible will kick it back and say, you can't put this, you need to raise the level, the general volume level, and it asks you to just keep crushing the audio upwards.
Oftentimes I was late and was obliged to eat a late dinner alone. But when all of our family sat down together, enough of life was manifested. At one end, my witty young brother provoked laughter in us with stuff and nonsense. Next him sat my younger sister, quiet and good. I assumed my position between my sister and my father and mother, who sat together at the head of the row. I forget to mention that my elder brother, whose place must be next above me, had been ordered to keep peace in the region of my merry little brother. My sister-in-law, or my elder brother's wife, took her stand opposite us, surrounded by a rice bucket, a cast-iron cooking pot, a teapot, a basket of rice bowls, saucers, etc. She it was who had to cook and serve dinner and wash dishes and take care of her babies. It is this that renders a young married woman's lot in life very hard in Japan, the principal weight of daily work devolving upon her. After all this, if parents-in-law are not pleased with her, she is in imminent danger of being turned off like a hired servant, however affectionate she may be towards her husband. And the husband feels it his duty to part with her, despite his deep attachment. So sacred is the regard.
As you can see, there's a lot of concepts here that may not have carried over to the modern era, which is what makes this really a fascinating read, because you're getting a glimpse into the authentic lifestyle of what this place was like at that time. And there's a lot of things that have changed, obviously, and there's a lot of things that have stayed the same. And what's really fascinating is that during this Meiji era of Japan, the West started to encroach, and this guy in his childhood actually lived through the school system changing from the Japanese style school system to the American style school system, and how those affected his education, and it's really interesting to read.
Husband. And the husband feels it his duty to part with her, despite his deep attachment. So sacred is regarded the manifestation of filial piety. Fortunately for my sister-in-law, with her, despite his deep attachment, so feels it his duty to part with her, despite his deep attachment. So sacred is regarded the manifestation of filial piety. Fortunately for my sister-in-law, my mother, who has 4 daughters living with their husbands' relatives, 4 daughters living with their husbands with their
Okay.
living with their husband, 4 daughters living with their husbands' relatives, made every household task as light and easy as she could for her. Made every household task as light and easy as she could for her. Husband's relatives made every household task as light and easy as she could for her, and expressed sympathy when needed, knowing that her own daughters were laboring in the like circumstances. We do not eat at one large laboring in the like circumstances. We do not eat at one large dining table with chairs round it. We sit on our heels on the matted floor. Chairs round it. We sit on our heels with chairs round it. We sit on our heels on the matted floor with a separate small table in front of each of us. I remember my table was in the form of a box about a foot square, the lid of which I lifted and laid on the body of the box with the inner surface up. The inner surface was japanned red, of the box with the inner surface up. The inner surface was japanned red, the outer surface and the sides of the box green. The convenience of this form of table is that you can store away your own rice bowl, vegetable dish, and chopstick case in the box. Some tables stand on 2 flat and broad legs, others have drawers. Some tables, we do not ring the and chopstick case in the box. Some tables stand on 2 flat and broad legs, others have drawers in their sides. We do not ring the bell in announcing dinner. In large families, they clap 2 oblong blocks of hard wood. Grace before meat was a thing unknown to us. My brother, however, had a queer habit of bowing to his chopsticks at the close of meals. He did it from simple heartfelt gratitude and not for show. In his ignorance of chopstick, in heartfelt gratitude and not for show. In his ignorance of him who provideth our daily bread, he concluded to return thanks to the tools of immediate usefulness. Provideth our daily bread, he concluded to return thanks to the tools of immediate usefulness. Chopsticks are of various materials, bamboo, mahogany, ivory, etc., and in different shapes, round, angular, slender, round, etc., and in different shapes, round, angular, slender at one end and stout at the other, etc. In a great public feast where there is no knowing the number present, or a religious fete where reverential cleanliness is formally insisted upon, fork-shaped splints of soft wood are distributed among the guests, who rend them asunder into pairs of impromptu chopsticks. On the morning of New Year's Day, tradition requires us to use chopsticks prepared hastily of mulberry twigs in handling rice paste cakes called mochi.
It's interesting the way he's describing it. One of the other things I found really fascinating about this book is that people in the 1800s didn't know about a lot of the Japanese concepts we know about now because they hadn't come over yet. So, like he just described basically one of the most common things, Japanese concepts we have here, which is like temporary chopsticks, like where you pull them apart and you use this two wooden chopsticks. But he's describing it for people who would never have heard of that before. And there's another part where he's describing shoyu, which for anybody who knows even a little bit of Japanese, shoyu is soy sauce. And any American you ask now, you would just say, he describes things where he says like, oh, samurai, parentheses, warrior. So you would think he would say shoyu, parentheses, soy sauce. And it actually threw me for a loop because he didn't. And he describes it like, oh yeah, shoyu is this thing that we have, and it's made out of these ingredients. And I think it's actually in this chapter where he says it. It's made out of these ingredients, and it's very popular in Japan. And I was like, why didn't he just say shoyu is soy sauce, to make it easier for people to know, make the connection in their head. And I did some research and realized that soy sauce actually didn't come to the US until like 20 years after this book was published. So people who would have been reading this book would have never even heard of soy sauce, which is insane to think about because it's literally like, even for people who don't know any Japanese food, they know what soy sauce is. It's used in all sorts of foods. If you go to any Chinese restaurant, there's soy sauce, on every table. So yeah, it's a lot of really interesting kind of like historical points that make the book very fascinating. Made it fascinating for me, and it's what made me want to put this out and share it with people.
On the morning of New Year's Day, tradition requires us to use chopsticks prepared hastily of mulberry twigs in handling rice paste cakes called mochi, which the people cook with various edibles to eat. Cook with various edibles and eat various edibles. People cook with various edibles. The people cook with various edibles and eat as a sort of religious ceremony. Food. Rice is the staple food.
I think it is this chapter where he says that. Between text and section heading.
And eat as a sort of religious ceremony. Food. Rice is the staple food. Vegetables and fishes are also consumed, yet no meat is eaten. Food. Rice is the staple food. Vegetables and fishes are also...
I thought I had redone this part of the of the text. That's the nice part about editing your own narrations, and especially editing them soon after narrating them. You can remember stuff like that.
Food. Rice is the staple food. Vegetables and fishes are also consumed, yet no meat is eaten. Partridge and game, however, were sanctioned from early times as food, or rather as luxuries. To cook rice just right, as food, consumed, yet no meat is eaten. Partridge and game, however, were sanctioned from early times as food, or rather as luxuries. To cook rice just right, not too soft nor too hard, is not an easy matter. It is considered an art every Japanese maiden of marriageable age must needs acquire. The rice is first washed in a wooden tub, and then transferred to a deep iron cooking pot with some water. The point lies in the question, how much water is needed? Neither too much nor too little. There's a golden mean. If the rice be cooked either the very least little bit soft or hard, the young servant wife, for really that she is blamed for it. The right amount of water is only ascertained by...
It's also interesting that he seems to recognize the injustice of the situation in a lot of cases, even being of his own era. And a lot of that comes from because he's not writing about his own country for people outside of his country, but he's writing about his own country while also being very familiar with the culture of another country. So there's kind of like a second lens that you can view this book through, where it's like he's writing the book for the people in America who would be reading it. So he's also playing to the tastes of the Americans. So like if you were writing it for Japanese people at the time, you obviously wouldn't kind of criticize the cultural norms, but because he's writing it for Americans and he knows that they're probably, these 19th century Americans are probably going to be like, oh, how could they do that? He's kind of like lightly criticizing it. And in this case, it's something that, a lot of the stuff is pretty unjust, but there are other cases where he's also like he will diminish his own culture's concepts because he knows that Americans, he's almost like getting out in front of the fact that he knows that Americans will probably sort of like be shocked by them. It's like a very unpretentious little piece of writing that he did at this time, but as a time capsule, there's like so many layers to it that I was you can just keep unpeeling and really find like this incredible. I think it's like a treasure of information and of a look into multiple cultures. Not only by reading what he's written, but by reading between the lines of what he chose not to write. It's very, very fascinating to me.
Nor too little. There's a golden mean. If the rice be cooked either the very least little bit soft or hard, the young servant wife, for really that she is blamed for it. The right amount of water is only ascertained by trial. No less trial. The right amount of water is only ascertained by trial. No less puzzling is the degree of heat to be applied to
Okay, yeah, I see what I was doing there.
For it. The right wife, for really that she is blamed for it. The right that she is blamed for it. The right amount of water is only ascertained by trial. No less puzzling is the degree of heat to be applied to the pot, and the point at which to withdraw the fuel and leave the cooking to be completed without degree of heat to be applied to the pot, and the point at which to withdraw the fuel and leave the cooking to be completed without any further application of heat. These things I speak of not merely from observation, but from personal experience. When I was off at a boarding school, which I may have occasion to speak of, I experimented in boarding myself for a while. I learned there how to cook as at a young ladies' seminary, as well as how to write and read. Hot boiled rice we always as well as how to write and read. As well as how to write and read. Hot boiled as well as how to write and read. Hot boiled rice we always have at dinner. I learned there how to cook as at a young ladies' seminary, as well as how to write and read. Hot boiled rice we always have at dinner. At supper and breakfast we pour boiling tea over cold rice in the bowl and are content. Tea is boiling in the kitchen from morning till night. It is drunk with no sugar or milk. Indeed, the scrupulous inhabitants of the land of the gods never dreamt of tasting the milk of a brute. If a babe no sugar or milk, indeed the scrupulous inhabitants of the land of the gods never dreamt of tasting the milk of a brute. If a babe is nourished with cow's milk, it is believed that the horns will grow on its forehead. It is believed that the horns will grow on its forehead. It is believed that the
Can I get away with that?
With cow's milk, it is believed that the horns with cow's milk. It is believed that the horns is nourished with cow's milk. It is believed that the horns will grow on its forehead. When no that the horns will grow on its forehead. When no palatable dishes are to be had, is nourished with cow's milk, it is believed that the horns will grow on its forehead. When no palatable dishes are to be had, we eat our rice with pickled plums and preserved radishes, turnips, eggplants, and cabbage. The preserves are not done up in turnips, eggplants, and cabbage. The preserves are not done up in turnips, eggplants, and cabbage. The preserves are not done up in glass jars. They're kept in a huge tub of salt and rice bran. During the summer months, when vegetables are the summer months. During the summer months, when vegetables are plenty and cheap, we buy a great quantity of them from a farmer of our acquaintance. He brings them on the back of a horse. The poor animal is usually loaded so heavily. The poor animal is quantity of them from a farm. Days are cabbage leaf. Many more days are spent in.
I never did a second reading of that line, huh?
Farmer of our acquaintance. From a farmer of our acquaintance. He brings them on the back of a horse. The poor animal acquaintance. He brings them on the back of a horse. The poor animal is usually loaded so heavily that only his head and tail are visible amidst the mountain of cabbage leaves. Days are spent in washing. Many more days are spent in washing and mountain of cabbage leaves. Days are spent in washing that only his head and tail are visible amidst the mountain of cabbage leaves. Days are spent in washing and scrubbing the roots and bulbs of the garden. Many more, housetops, and bulbs of the garden. Many more in drying them in the sun. Housetops, weather-beaten walls, fences, and all available windy corners are utilized in hanging up the vegetables. When partly dried, they're packed utilized in hanging up the vegetables. When partly dried, they're packed in salt and rice bran and subjected to pressure in bamboo-hooped wooden tubs, commonly being but tubs, and subjected to pressure in bamboo-hooped wooden tubs, commonly by laying old millstones on them. Being but partially dry, millstones on them. Being but partially dry, the vegetables deliver the remaining moisture to the powder in which they are packed, and in course of time, the whole contents become soaked in a yellowish, muddy, pungent liquid. Cocoa, as the vegetables are then called, can be preserved in this way throughout the whole year. They are taken out from time to time, washed and sliced, and relished with great satisfaction. Time to time, washed and sliced, and relished with great satisfaction. There's something that is sure to be obtained in any house at any time. With cold rice and hot tea, they make up. There's something that is sure to be obtained in any house at any time. With
First one's better.
Sure to be obtained. There's something that is sure to be obtained in any house at any time. With cold rice and hot tea, they make up our simplest fare. When I was late from school, I made out my dinner. They make up our simplest fare. When I was late from school, I make up our simplest fare. When I was late from school, I made out my dinner with the rice and cocoa. Frequently, however, my provident mother set aside for me something nice.
Nice. Okay, that's a chapter done, actually. Love it. Okay, that's going to do it for this one then, ladies and gents. Once again, the book that will be coming out is called A Japanese Boy. Putting out a new digital illustrated edition as well as an audiobook edition on Audible, so keep your eye on the Kindle store and on the Audible store to find it for yourself in its full form. Thanks for watching the behind the scenes, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.